Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we go with another episode where I have the opportunity to speak with another accessibility practitioner. Today, I'm speaking with Russ Mullen. Hello, Russ. How are you doing today?
Hi there. How are you going, Joe? How's things?
Everything's going really well. I am located right now in my home office on Vashon Island, which is a true island with no bridges, near Blink's Seattle, Washington headquarters. Where are you talking to us from today?
I'm from Canberra, Australia. So for ones unfamiliar, it's about 320 kilometres southwest of Sydney, slap bang in the middle of nowhere. So very much just surrounded by bush. So we have no beach, no sea, but we have a lot of beautiful countryside around here.
And I have been there. I went to a conference there one time and got to see the interesting architecture that was developed. I believe your city was kind of a design capital city for Australia. Wasn't that originally how it was set up?
It was, yes, yeah, and it was one of your fellow residents won the competition, Walter Burley Griffin. So I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, it was the early 20th century. There was this competition for designing the new federal capital here. Canberra was chosen, and the Griffins designed it all without ever having visited here. So there's our largest lake is Lake Burley Griffin, named after Walter. So there's a lot of interesting background history of how this American couple laid the foundations for what is Canberra now.
Well, it's good to have you join here. I appreciate it. We were able to get the time zones to work out, but a good place to start is, talk a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing right now, and then we can explore how you got there.
Lovely. I work under my company name at the moment, CANAXESS. We've been working in web accessibility now for about 12 years plus. At the moment, I'm working with a large Australian supermarket, helping them meet accessibility guidelines and reaching that, increasing the user experience. Before that, I was working in government. So previously, my role was that of a background developer, a back end. I moved into front end, and then over time, I moved into a dedicated web accessibility roles. So originally, my background was very much focused on compliance, but more and more, I was reading more into web accessibility and understanding the nuances more. So more and more now, I find when I have any questions related to web accessibility, it's more that it depends. It's recognizing more of the nuances in accessibility. So that's where I am at the moment. We're working with a large supermarket, and they've done ever so well meeting all of their accessibility obligations, but they're at a point now of wanting to radically improve the user experience. So once you've met all your minimum accessibility guidelines and compliance aspects, then it's recognizing that we can do much more, and that's what's really interesting me at the moment, the sort of what next in accessibility.
Well, as we were talking a little bit before we started the recording, we were talking a little bit about the differences between, the importance of compliance for companies getting involved in accessibility versus return on investment versus it being a socially progressive thing to do. And so you had some thoughts about how things were in Australia, and I think that would be kind of interest to people that aren't in that area in terms of how important the compliance aspect is for companies coming to you to work on things versus other reasons that they might want to get involved with it.
Very much so, yeah. One of my early roles was within the government, and even 15 years ago, there was this recognition that due to the disability laws here, we would need to make all of our government digital services accessible. So it was very much focused on compliance, but then also there were pockets of innovation. Individual teams thought this is our minimum, but let's do more than that. And for several years, that was how it was moving along. Pockets of individual expertise driving accessibility, but not necessarily making a massive impact, but doing enough to try and make government to digital services accessible. And then with the work with the UK government, a similar agency over here was created, the Digital Transformation Agency, and so they brought over a lot of their expertise with what they'd had accomplished in the UK government. One of the things was introducing a digital service standard. This was basically a guideline or a blueprint of how to make up for government services which serve the needs of the user. So moving away from that compliance aspect into making it truly user-centric. So this document had several criteria for how to improve government online services. One of those points was accessibility. It was this individual item called out, and that was really, I guess, the catalyst within a government, which moved us from only doing the bare minimum to recognizing what can we do better. And that's when we could really see those innovations in accessibility more and more and more. And then based on the back of that work, there was the creation of a design system which had a lot of those accessibility principles baked in. And so the bold aim with this design system was that any federal and state government agency could deploy a website quickly which had all of those core fundamentals. So all of those accessibility principles baked in, and then underpinning that, it was this documentation of how to do more and more and more. So that's been one of the main motivators in the government space in recent years. The Digital Transformation Agency's bold aims of doing more, where rather than just making up a digital service and having users fit in to working with it, it was recognizing what can we do better. And that's where we really saw innovations in accessibility, so bigger and better things, where one of the main things was that consistency. So if you had a design system, whilst government websites using it would work consistently, it was baking in a lot of that accessibility. So before that, it was very much accessibility was open to different levels of interpretation. So one team in one department might think you would achieve accessibility in this way. Another team would say, no, this is the right way. So with the DTA's approach, it was sort of focusing all of our collective accessibility efforts into what's the best way. Let's do things one way and the right way. And it's been very, very well adopted. But as I'm sure you experienced, governments change. And so over time, that passion for accessibility is often there, but it's a bit more fragmented. And that's what we're noticing again. So as governments change, as elections happen, the focus of where and how digital services ought to be made is wandering a bit at times. So from my experience, there's always better ways to do things, and there's lots of individuals within a government are contributing to improving accessibility. But from where it was 5 years ago to now, we're noticing it drop off again.
Well, let's find a little bit more out about your background. Most of us come into accessibility in a lot of different ways, a lot of different paths of both our lived life and opportunities in our work life. And where did it start for you, where accessibility was something that you recognized as important and valuable, and then how did you decide that would also be something you'd want to do or become involved in as a profession?
Yeah, my background in accessibility began where I had recently joined a new team within government. So my background is that of a back-end developer. So writing a .NET, C#. One of the expectations of this new team was that they were making a brand new digital service, and as part of that, it needed to be accessible. As I joined the team, I recognised no one really wanted to read through a WCAG. At the most optimistic, it's a very dry document with lots of contradictory information. So I found, well, as I'm new, I would read it, and I would extract out things which we as a team would need to do. And so over many months of reading it and familiarizing myself with it, more and more I recognized I was enjoying it, where I could understand that my work as a back-end developer could really significantly improve the end user's experience if we understood accessibility more. And I was putting out those things which made sense, and more I was becoming more familiar. And as is always the case, anyone who is showing a depthness at understanding everything is suddenly labelled the expert. Well, I never viewed myself as that. I was just reading more and then understanding it more. And then through my initial work in accessibility, I recognised I was liking it more. I could understand it more. I could drill down deeper and further. So as my background of a software engineer, I was always wanting to really understand concepts more than just the superficial level. And I found with accessibility, it was something which was hooking me more and more, so that I moved to other teams where ultimately, I moved into a dedicated web accessibility role. Our regular work was auditing government applications and working closely with a colleague. We were a very good combination of moving past that level of compliance, things which are the minimum level, to making recommendations of how to radically improve a user's experience, regardless of their disabilities. And then I found, working in accessibility, I would be exposed to the work of other agencies and other companies, and I found there was a real, not necessarily lacking of expertise, but through my engineer's background, I was recognizing that the information being provided isn't necessarily helpful. So I identified that I was doing better work than many of the incumbents, and thought, well, I think there's a gap in the market for another company, and that's when I took the step and launched CANAXESS, because I recognised, whilst all of the incumbents' work was very good, I felt I could do it better, and I could just use another angle. So ultimately, I feel accessibility is that a technical discipline at times, where understanding how things work in HTML, in code within JavaScript, can really affect the end user experience if they're using assistive technology. So I guess my grounding in software development made me appreciate more that how things which are written can vastly affect the end user's experience if they're using assistive technology. And through that, I launched my own company, and it's been a wonderful journey. I've met lots of interesting individuals, worked with lots of different people, and then recognize more that the learning with accessibility never ends. So I always initially had this optimistic point of, once I reach year X, I would know about accessibility and I'd be that knowledgeable individual. But I found the more I learn and the more I understand, the more I feel that I don't know enough. And that's driven me more and more and more to consume more blogs, to reach out to more people, and overwhelmingly just look past my own biases of, I think this is absolutely right, I would do it this way, but to recognize more that with accessibility, it's that the testing it again, testing it in multiple browsers, in multiple assistive technology tools, recognizing that just because something works in one browser, in one screen reader, that might not necessarily be right for everyone's experience. And I feel that over time, that uncertainty now has made me a bit more humble with recognizing that my experience is just one voice. It's recognizing many others have an equally valid voice. And I try and take all that on board as much as I can.
Well, I mean, you've had a lot of experience, in working with government agencies. So you had all of those experiences, and then you've had your experiences working as a consultant. As you kind of look at where accessibility is today, is there one area where you think maybe the accessibility community needs to put in more effort, maybe an area that you think is particularly important for us to be aware of looking forward? Is there any certain place that maybe you're most excited about developments that are coming along. So just if you have an idea about maybe one of those future items.
One of my major pet peeves, and I found there's a real appetite for understanding accessibility in this area, is with a complex UI controls. So when you're making up a complex digital service, there might be lots of interactivity there. So the teams would leverage the third party tools, which have like dialog boxes and drop downs and auto suggest a control. So rather than a team having to build that, they just use an existing component library. Now, these vendors may make bold accessibility claims of we are 100% accessible to WCAG 2.2, 2.1, AA. We have VPATs. We write about accessibility regularly, and that often makes software teams building digital services complacent, where if a vendor has made these bold accessibility claims, there's all of this evidence indicating that they value accessibility and they've built it well. And then these software teams adopt it, because part of the procurement process is making sure that the tool which you're using is fit for a purpose. But then one of the most challenging times was several years ago with a large government application where they followed all of those all of that material. This company had written blog posts, mentioned accessibility, and this team had readily adopted everything. So every single screen had UI controls from this vendor. What we then found is when we were auditing it towards the end, just that final tick of, is this application accessible and ready for the general public? What we noticed was every single workflow was flawed, where we had a testing with people with vision impairments, and they weren't able to get past the first screen. And that was really disappointing, because at that point the application had been written, and there was many months and significant amounts of resources would have to be dedicated to fix it. So in many ways, that experience of my past has jaded me a little with recognizing what a vendor says isn't necessarily correct, where I wouldn't say they're lying, but there's being a little bit optimistic with their claims, where we as accessibility individuals need to treat cautiously any bold claim of accessibility compliance, where we can recognize all of a vendor's efforts with writing blog posts, having a dedicated accessibility issue tracking, and even making claims about it, all look promising. But unless we do our due diligence of confirming that, it's ultimately meaningless. Where yes, we can take all that information on board, but ultimately we and other software teams and other individuals who are commissioning large projects need to really hold to account companies who have made bold claims about accessibility, because often they might not be entirely accurate. And I guess that us as a community as well, it needs to move away at times of this, how best can I say it? It's recognizing that accessibility is often, with some voices, treated as this this a theoretical exercise that the best approach is to use native HTML elements where possible, which is valid. But then it's recognizing that other teams also have as equal input. So we, I guess, need to do a better where accessibility is vitally important, but as part of delivering a software, a project and digital services, we also need to recognize at times that sometimes we need to make compromises where one approach might be the best approach, but we also need to understand that sometimes that best approach isn't workable, and we might need to use a tool set which is inaccessible. So rather than being that loud voice which is making dismissive remarks about the accessibility efforts of a vendor, we need to say this isn't working, but you could do this, this, and this. So I guess us as an accessibility community as a whole, adopting an approach of humility more, where I don't necessarily think anyone is going out of the way to deliberately make a service inaccessible or poor for a blind user. I think more it's the expectations are much more increased now with the software teams. There's less resourcing and less time, and so often people make poor judgment calls, which mean that the end user experience is affected. So overwhelmingly, it's recognizing that it's not often a black and white approach. It's recognizing those nuances and having to compromise, and often lose the battle but win a greater war. So if our aim is to make things accessible, we often have to recognize that we might have to allow compromises with images which have poor descriptions or controls which have poor accessibility. But if there's a roadmap of remedying it, then that's a good compromise.
Thanks for that case study example. That was very helpful to get that and to get your insights on that. And I want to thank you for participating in this, Ross. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. And hopefully we can meet in person sometime at a physical event, maybe either on this side or over on your side. It was good to chat with you.
I hope so too, Joe. Thanks so much, and really good to talk with another accessibility professional. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joe.